Hi guys, welcome back to tea time. We have
Hello.
we have once more Admiral Paco here, and we're going to be talking about that writing crap again because we're always talking about that writing crap.
There's always more things to talk about when it comes to writing.
It's true. So today's episode is coming off of the Steven Universe video, so yeah, we won't get into that. That was a long video that took a lot out of me, and we're still going strong. But whatever. Today's video is going to be fun. We're going to be talking about group storytelling.
Yeah, Hella needed something different after all of that Steven Universe, and so Paco came back to help carry the load of conversation and thought.
Well, right after Steven Universe, I decided, you know what's a good subject to tackle? We're going to tackle the super soldier thing. That also took a lot out of me. So much research. So I was like, please, I need anything that's not like research today.
Yeah, I did the research on this one, Hella. You don't need to worry about that.
Yay! Today's episode is brought to you by the Power of Friendship. That is not actually a sponsor. We don't get paid money for it, but
We wish they were a sponsor. Wish we were getting that sweet, sweet money.
oh yeah, right. You sold out, and I'll do it again. Money's money, my guys.
Especially for the power of friendship.
Yeah. So we originally were talking about this way long back ago during the before time in Tumblr when Tumblr got to participate in its national sport, which is lying.
Yes. The where is the meme? You think someone on the internet would just tell lies?
That is,
meanwhile Tumblr going, yeah, the greatest mafia movie ever told. We've all seen it.
for the record, right? Because I like to out myself on my channel. I was there when it was like being made. I was there Gandalf 3,000 years ago.
Yeah. Or
And-
5 months, whatever it was.
Right. Now, for a long time, right, I thought, oh, was this like a Sundance Film Festival that I just haven't heard of? I was completely convinced that this was a movie that was really real. And then, amazingly enough, somebody did the biggest party foul ever. They said, yeah, and Bo Burnham composed the music. Immediate record screech.
Hella had an immediate moment of, wait, hold on.
For those of you who don't know, Bo Burnham was born in like 91 or 92. He couldn't have possibly been alive to compose the music for a film supposedly made in the 80s. I'm sorry.
70s.
Whatever.
Yeah. Regardless, the point stands. Bo Burnham was not alive to compose the music for the movie Goncharov.
So,
Unreality.
right. So from one person's small, minute mess up, I realized, oh man, I was Bobo'd the fooled hard, and I completely was in the circus. This is great.
Yeah, I also hang out on Tumblr, and so my exposure to Goncharov had actually happened where people were acknowledging that it was not real in the tags by using the tag unreality, which was actually a very generous thing that the Tumblr community quickly latched onto doing, because there were a number of people that have that were on Tumblr that expressed that the joke was very distressing for them because they had a mental condition where they have a hard time keeping reality and fakeness separate, like distinct. And so very quickly the Tumblr community went, oh, well, we want this to be a fun jokey joke. We don't want it to be causing you distress. We're just going to tag it with unreality, and so then people can look at the tag and be in on the joke.
Yeah, Tumblr is a weird hellscape, but it's very considerate for a hellscape.
It is a very bizarre element of a social media hellscape in which you can fairly quickly get a broad collective of people to go, oh, we wanted this to be fun and jokey. We didn't actually want it to cause distress. Here, let us assist.
Yeah.
As opposed to, like, I don't know, Twitter, where, like, causing distress is the national pastime.
Right. On Tumblr, the national pastime is fucking lying. On Twitter, the national pastime is actual low-key warfare.
Yeah, psychological.
Yeah. Hella, you have a Twitter
Anyhow.
that I don't use. I have it for reasons, but I don't use it.
Yeah, me too.
Except the one time I tagged Paco in Twitter, and he literally came out of the depths like Neil Gaiman was like, I acknowledge this, and then he disappeared.
I acknowledge that this exists, and then I fade away back into the social media obscurity.
You can summon old gods? No, you can't summon Neil Gaiman by tagging him. You have to vaguely gesture in the opposite direction of where he's at, and then he'll acknowledge you. Still,
Old god may or may not show up. You don't summon them.
Yeah, they're always late to the party. But yeah, on Tumblr, this thing called Gantra of 1974... 75?
No, one of the early 1970s.
Right. Came into Tumblr. Now, the premise of this fake movie directed by Martin Scorsese was a man finds himself indoctrinated unintentionally into the mafia after he unwittingly saves the mob boss's wife, Katrina, and then everything else happens. There's a serial killer at some point. Katrina ends up murdering the mob boss husband, and it's a lot of, everybody agreed on Tumblr, a lot of gay overtones, and I'm like, what is this movie for the 70s? Like, what? What?
And the remarkable thing about, like, what Hella just outlined was kind of this was a general group consensus collective Tumblr, yeah, here we go, here's the main, like, framework of the story. But then every single person on Tumblr, exaggeration, came up with their own, like, individual scenes that they really liked that somehow somewhat meshed together within this framework of a story. And it's this process that Hella and I really wanted to talk about when it came to storytelling, because we these days don't tend to think of stories as being like a group project. We tend to think of them as being like one person writes a story, or maybe a person and an editor,
person and literary agent. Like, you don't think of it as a group of people made a story. You think of it as you did it.
Yep. And obviously there are some slight exceptions to that conception when it comes to like TV shows or movies. But even then, oftentimes the main central pitch of a movie or TV show, like a TV show episode, is done by one or maybe two or three individuals. Mm-hmm. Before a writing team gets together to actually like flesh out that idea. And it's done so with this small group of people is all on board. We all have the same intent. As opposed to Goncharov, where at best the most generous assessment of the collective intent was, this is fun.
Right. There's about 3 or 4 scenes in the movie that absolutely everybody that was in on this joke and perpetuating it agreed absolutely happened. Number 1, the fact that Katrina has a scene where she is putting on her makeup in a mirror, talking to the mob boss, right before she stabs him, and one of the most fire lines, like whoever came up with it had the most fire line ever, as she is supposedly looking at him through the mirror, she says, "You like things that you can't have, but once you have them, you're like a little boy and you get rid of them." And I was like, damn, okay. Who's ever on the writing part of this is having a grand old time doing their therapy through it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like a lot of writing.
Yeah, the other scene is supposedly the guy that's the main character, whose name is never consistent, like it changes constantly, like nobody can agree on the name, just main character was never put as an option, so everybody's just putting their 2 cents for insert stereotypical Jewish Italian name here, and I'm like, that's great, guys.
It's like, okay, yep, got it.
Finds the serial killer, and literally the serial killer has a whole moment of telling him, we're exactly the same. We were born empty and we don't know how to fill that gaping void. And I'm like, seriously, who's ever on the writing team, do you have a therapist you talk to? Serious question.
Well, to be fair, Hello, we are talking about the Tumblr community.
I know, they should.
I have one.
I know you do. And then the third scene that everybody agrees on, right, is the ending scene right before the credits hit, where Katrina is getting on a boat to go to America with supposedly a woman that she has been having an affair with. No, this was never made mention of prior to this. It's just, it came out of left field and you're supposed to stick with it. So that way they can go live a happy life as they are saying goodbye to the main character. And then literally when he gets in his car, somebody walks around and then just right in the head, and then the movie ends. And I'm like, but why? Like, we had a great thing going here. The main character could have lived. A lot of follow-up questions.
Well, for it to be great classic literature, it needs to have a sad ending. Those are the rules. My English teacher in high school told me.
Boo.
Only half sarcastically.
Yeah, but the reason why this was so wild is because for the 2 weeks I thought that this was a real movie, I was scouring the internet for anybody who could take me on the open seas and illegally pirate me this movie, because I was getting aggravated that I was FOMOing on it so hard. And then you find out there is no FOMO. It's not even real.
It's not a real thing. You were in fact in the know as much as you could have been the whole time.
Yeah. Once you know the joke, you realize, man, this was really great group storytelling, though. Like, there was not too much disagreement going on.
Yeah. Obviously, if you looked hard enough, you would find a lot of scenes that were incompatible with each other. But, like, the overall themes, the overall conceptions, the general, like, elements of the characters, no. The community at large that was telling this story together largely kind of consolidated and incorporated a broad movie that could be reasonably, yeah, this all fits.
The fact that the woman who played the original Wonder Woman too, that when she got on Tumblr just as this was happening, they got her in on this joke, right? She figured it out really fast. She perpetuated it because they said, oh yeah, she plays the love interest for Katrina at the end of the film. She dead ass said on her Tumblr, oh yeah, no, I met Martin Scorsese when I was really young during this movie. It was wild. It was a cool movie though, and we were like, ma'am, you don't get to agree on the joke. You are a celebrity. The peons must have their pound of flesh. But nobody cared that she was in on the joke. It actually made it more real for a whole week.
Oh, that's one of the things that I really appreciated about Linda Carter jumping onto Tumblr at that point in time, was that Linda Carter basically went, oh, this is what Tumblr is? I'm in.
Yeah, so that's also, like, weird tangent on Tumblr history. Other than, like, Hank Green and Neil Gaiman, there are not many front-facing celebrities, right, of any kind of notoriety on Tumblr. And the reason why is because on Tumblr land, your notoriety means nothing. It holds no power in the land of Tumblr.
I will throw one other name on that list of Will Wheaton.
Oh, yeah. Because
Will Wheaton has been on Tumblr basically since the start of Tumblr.
Yeah.
And one of the things... He is actually a person that I follow on the platform, and one of the things that I find very amusing is that he fairly regularly gets asked, are you the real Will Wheaton? And he always answers, no, it's Becky.
Right. So the reason why I bring this up, right, is
Anyhow.
because in the land of Tumblr, notoriety means nothing, and the celebrities who are there are just weird enough that most of the general populace of Tumblr know about them and also, in equal parts, completely ignore them and treat them as the same as them. It's the weirdest social media platform that everybody is on equal footing, nobody is more special.
Yeah, basically. There really is no clout game on Tumblr. Not really.
Right. You can have quote-unquote infamous or famous people on there, but the Tumblr nation does not acknowledge... I have diplomatic immunity. Not here, you don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there certainly will be individuals that might have it's famous celebrity on this platform. But unless you're interesting on the platform, it does not matter.
Right. It's the reason why when, like, Ryan Reynolds tried to get on and he was like, it's too complicated, it's not complicated. Actually, it is the most weirdly easy system ever. It is complicated in how the social structure is set up.
Yeah. And it can be opaque to determine, like, how to insert yourself into Tumblr culture, which is one of the things that, like, Linda Carter managed to catch on really quickly and do really well.
Well, that's like when a friend of mine first got their Tumblr back when we were in, like, middle school. God, I've been there forever. They were like, well, how does it work? Is it like Twitter? Do you have to tag stuff? Do you have to know people? And I looked at them and I was like, you can scream into the void, and I promise you somebody else will actually answer you back. And you'll probably spark an argument, too. And they were like, how? I was like, don't question it. Just, it's a void that answers. That's all you gotta know.
Yeah. There isn't really an algorithm doing it. It's like somehow people find stuff.
Right, now you can tag anything you want on there, just like Kontrarov. People will find it, and if it's really interesting, they'll stalk the tag. You don't follow tags on Tumblr. There's no follow button. If you just keep going to that tag enough, it'll just keep popping up for your feed. You've stalked it.
Yeah. And you can always look up a specific tag and go, alright, so what is there about Goncharov this week?
It's still going. It's wild.
Bunnies, or...
The outhouse.
I don't know. Yeah, exactly.
For the record, you'll actually find really deep insight on Tumblr, too, for people who realistically even say it. It's like they don't do media analysis, but they have some of the most in-depth takes that you're like, what is your day job, my guy? That you don't do this. Because it's wild.
Oh, I work at Starbucks.
Yeah. It's a lot of baristas. And, like, students.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the reason why we say this is because Tumblr as a whole, the national sport being lying, means that you can actually start a random, like, story or story idea and then just leave it, right? Like, you've just put it on the table, you can walk away. You will come back a week later. This will have gotten millions of notes, millions of reblogs. People will have made side stories to your original concept. They will have added to it. It will have grown a life of its own while you were gone.
Let's not oversell it, Hella. It'll get tens of thousands of reblogs.
I know. But still.
Tumblr is not the juggernaut that it once was a decade ago.
Yeah, well, a lot of people ended up leaving. And I shouldn't say leaving like they actively closed their accounts. Leaving as in, well, we've been there forever, Paco. When the Armageddon happened, a lot of people jumped ship, but their ship is still there, so it's like they can come back anytime they want.
Yep. But to Hella's point, it is entirely possible to throw something out into the ether and for the Tumblr community to pick that idea up and run with it. And run with it in several different, like, directions that are roughly parallel with each other. And it's that element of group storytelling that we really wanted to talk about because of the way that is not the norm of storytelling in the present day.
It really isn't. Like, You'll think of an idea, right? Any idea you want, right? Sally goes to the store, discovers magical door to not Narnia. Cool, cool, cool. Sounds dope. And you'll tell people this story, right? Because they're not with you on that writing journey, supposedly. So you just tell random people about this. Like, everybody you meet that'll actually give you the 20 seconds of the day to listen to it. That's how people assume. Some stories don't work like that. Some people actually are like, this sounds like a dope story. May I partake? Yeah, sure. And then you give them editing access, and then suddenly it's 47 pages from the day you started to now, and you're like, what happened?
How did we get here? But another example of this kind of group storytelling that takes place in the present day that had occurred to me while I was jotting down notes for this. Dungeons and Dragons sessions.
Oh, that is also
/ realistically any role-playing game, where even though the dungeon master or whoever has that role, depending on the naming convention, depending on the role-playing game, they may have their story. Like, they may have the overarching story that they are like heading down, but the players are contributing to the story actively in ways that the person that created the campaign may not have intended.
Right. Like, if one player decides, I am a paladin, I am here to oversee all the good in the world. Cool, cool, who's your friend? He's the person I am parole officing for. Excuse me? I'm a rogue. And he's your parole officer? That's why he's with me. To do one good deed to get out of my life sentence. So many follow-up questions to that storyline, but also, as a dungeon master, you kind of really don't care. You need to get them to the big bad evil guy at the end, so you're like, okay, cool, whatever.
Yep. And as well as, like, during the campaign itself, you may have your, okay, here is the rough linear progression I am expecting my players to take, and, like, if you are a really solid dungeon master and you have a group of people that you're leading that aren't, like, complete chaos gremlins, you can kind of direct them in the way that you want to go, but there's always the risk of the players just going, hey, we're just gonna wander off into the woods over here.
Okay, so I remember playing a D&D campaign. I was a death paladin, right? Where it's like, death and me were bros. And I remember we got to the big bad evil guy, and the dungeon master told me, it's like, the king is praying. And I was like, is it back to me? He goes, yeah. He's like, I want to whack him over the head with my mace. And he looked at me, he goes, did you not hear me? I said he's praying. And I was like, good. He's already getting 90% of the bullshit out of the way before I actually kill him. We're making great progress. I want to roll to hit the shit out of him. And he was like, okay. I got a nat 20 plus my plus 13 damage on it from the mace I had gotten, so I nuked that guy in one go.
Thwack.
Yeah, our Dungeon Master too just looked at me, he goes, you didn't even stop to consider that he was praying for something important. And I was like, I didn't stop to consider that the evil guy that's been fucking with us the entire campaign was praying? Yeah, no, I was over it by that point.
Yeah, that was already no longer a present concern.
Right? Like, he's praying. He's getting 90% of the work done for me. Instead of me asking, what are your final words? He's already doing it for me. I don't need to care at this point.
Very thoughtful of him.
I was told I could no longer play a Death Paladin after I went that group. They were like, no more Death Paladin for you. You're overpowered. I was like... Save your pity for the weak.
But it's fun.
I became a tiefling who's a bard. It was even worse, so they let me go back to being a paladin.
Be careful what you wish for, they say.
You can't be a morally righteous paladin. Understood. Degenerate bard. That's not what we said. That's what I heard.
Oh, okay. Paladin it is.
Yeah. But yeah, like, that is technically group storytelling. Even though, like, there's a bare bones story that the Dungeon Master already has in their mind, you're allowed to technically be like, what's in the spooky woods? it's scenery. I didn't just go down the path. I want to explore the spooky woods. Well, fine. Let's explore the spooky woods and let me make something up on the fly.
Yeah. And I am not someone that has played D&D, but I have friends that regularly do, and secondly, I was present during a particular campaign, like just hanging out in the chat. And so I'm familiar with the general concepts and stories, etc., and how this works, etc., etc. Amongst some of my favorite stories that I have heard regarding playing D&D are the ones where the group goes on a different tangent from what the Dungeon Master had planned, and that ends up becoming a major overarching point for the whole campaign, where the group decided, we're going to do this other thing that you did not intend, and the combination of that and the Dungeon Master making up story on the fly ends up leading to creating a new major overarching thread for the whole campaign.
Yeah? Okay, actually, I remember the one time I was Dungeon Master, right? It was a one and done deal.
Yeah.
I couldn't handle it, not because I was, better than it, but because, I just couldn't handle them and their chaos shenanigans for more than, an hour every other week. They decided all of them to be murder hobos, right? No matter what happened, mercy was never on the table. So I completely wiped whatever story I had originally, and I was like, okay, they're about to fight the undead constantly from here on out. And I kept my promise. So, there's gotta be a Lich King, and I was like, yeah, there is. I got them all the way to the end, and it was a Lich King dragon. I really wanted to hammer in home how badly they had fucked up, because I was super over them and their murdering.
Yep.
I was only one guy left, right? Everybody else had been nuked at this point, because I had made this dragon so fucking overpowered on purpose. And then he was like, why would you just raise the dead? He's like, what was your end game? And I was like, because my people were already dying, I figured I could make them immortal in death so they could still live their lives. They weren't bothering anybody or anything. They were very content to stay in this little region of the world with me and continue as always. Yous came in and decided to kill all of them because I don't know why. You just
because did. Reasons.
So since you took from me, I'll take from you. And I won't raise you. You can actually experience death. And they were like, she's crazy. I was like, no, if you guys don't want to follow the story, that's fine. But you do not get to be upsetty spaghetti when I decide to middle finger your decision and make you suffer for your consequences.
Yeah, I can also share a similar thing that happened to a friend of mine when she was dungeon mastering for a campaign, that she had created this lovely little town populated by various peoples that was an opportunity for the group to be able to engage in a storyline quest that was a lot more interacting with NPCs and conversations, because that's what this group likes to do. Historically, that is the thing that they have generally liked. And to provide context, this group has done Dungeons and Dragons together for somewhere around 12 years. So this was a well-known component.
Oh no.
And for some reason, on this particular day, they had decided, you know what? We're gonna murder hobo the entire town.
Insert Morgan Freeman narration here.
Yeah, and this was an immensely frustrating point for the Dungeon Master, because she had undergone so much effort to set up a story that allowed them to do the thing that they say that they always want to do. And for a couple of innocuous reasons that say, okay, I understand why you decided to murder the town, but Like, you decided to murder the town, and that's a lot of effort that was wasted.
Yeah. It basically is one of those things, right, where it's like, look, if you're going to tell your story, you can add anything you want in there, but if it's going to be an interactive story that other people get to participate in, they are also allowed to make, frankly, horrible choices, and you're going to have to roll with that and figure out a new story beat.
Yeah. And to pull it back from, like, D&D role-playing specifically to broader, like, group storytelling, it is another thing that when you are making stories with other people, you can't necessarily predict how other people are going to steer the story.
Right.
And depending on the circumstances, there may be, like, some editing that you can do to jive things together, but other times it's well, this is the direction we're going now.
This is true. Okay. I harp on about Lore Olympus is because Lore Olympus, as I've made a video on it before, is a webcomic made by a woman in Australia. And it's made a lot of money. And it really hit its notoriety during the, end of the world lockdown that didn't really accomplish the end of the world. But whatever. It's a retelling of the Hades and Persephone myth. And I was like, oh, cool, this is really neat. It's because in this version of the myth, they meet like regular people do, right? There was no kidnapping and shenaniganry that happened. And I was like, oh, cool. A retelling that takes a more modern sensibility. Awesome. That's the only part of it that was changed. Everything else is still kosher. And I was like, huh? Wait. If you're gonna reboot and retell it, why would you keep all of the horrible stuff in there? Like, like, serious question. And no one's been able to answer it for me.
Maybe. Genuinely, I do not know. But maybe that overall structure was important to them for the theme? Question mark?
Let's question mark it. The reason why I bring this up, right, is because people argue all the time. It's like, well, Hades kidnapped her, he forced himself on her, blah, blah, blah. Other people argue they already had met naturally because he was trying to get away from the dead and their whiny asses, so he just went upstairs to literally get some fresh air and met her, and then she decided to walk her happy butt all the way downstairs and didn't want to leave. They got married and everything else. There was none of the other stuff, and I was like, okay. Depending on whatever time period you want, both versions are technically true, since both versions kind of came around the same time, because the original was when, yes, you were legally allowed to kidnap your wife and take her to your house and say, we're married now, no, I will not question it, and also during the time when you do have to ask permission before you just take stuff, my guys. It was a weird time to be alive in.
And different places, different customs.
Right.
Because that actually does bring up another point when it comes to group storytelling, when it comes to like myths and fairy tales. But it's not quite group storytelling in the way that we've been talking about thus far, in which people are telling the story as it's like happening in the present day. But with myths and fairy tales, it's group storytelling across like time and different places. They may have like an original story that they are all drawing back to, but different groups of people in different places, or the same group of people but across many generations, the story changes and tweaks and warps depending on the time and place in which it is told.
Right. Like, right now, right, on TikTok and YouTube right now, Epic, which is just the retelling of the Odyssey, right, with Odysseus and everything, is really being pushed right now, because the guy who's making it is literally making different acts and story beats and basically making his own stage play from it, which is great. 10 out of 10. Great to see it. However, there are a couple key components that are being drastically changed. Number one, and it is like it's the most fire song in the musical in my opinion, called The Horse and the Infant, which is the Trojan horse story, right? In that story, Odysseus literally has to make a decision of killing a basically what amounts to like a 3-month-old baby who is the son of Prince Hector, who at this point in the story had been like a main antagonist to Odysseus. Now, in the original, he didn't even think about it, right? There was not even a second thought. He was like, I'll sell you to Satan for a corn chip. That's how much thought went into it. But in this musical version, he's actually arguing like, but if I raise him as my own, and I never tell him anything, and blah blah blah, he'll never come to raise to hate me and defeat me. To which the guy that's singing Zeus in this makes it a point to him of like, look, my guy, you have to make a decision here because this is already written in stone. He will kill you when you get older. So you can either kill him now or he can kill you tomorrow. Pick an option. And I was like, what a wildly drastic difference from the original Odyssey, which is just a really long book to get through.
Yeah, that was a very long book to get through. I don't remember much of it at this point, but I did at one point read the whole thing.
Right, so in the retelling of like this stage play, he's trying to make Odysseus seem a little more human, which I was like, okay, that's not a bad thing, because in the original book, Odysseus is written like a bog standard white guy protagonist with like no ulterior motives other than whatever is put directly in front of him.
Well, to be fair, he was one of like the originals, if you will.
Right? I don't mean to lump a group of people in a hive. I just want to be my dad in 1985. Thanks, Bo Burnham. Anyway.
Anyway.
You can't copyright strike me for that, YouTube. That was a very poor rendition of a song that was only 30 seconds.
It's like we did not sing that well enough for this to be a copyright strike.
Or like an homage, so fight me, I'll fight you on that. Anyway. But yeah, like, that is a drastic retelling, right? It's still hitting every single story beat, but it's added humanity to the main character that wasn't there before, which has now made it drastically different. Also, the gods are really prevalent in this one. Like, they're mentioned a couple times in the original Odyssey, but not enough to, like, really that you care. These are like, no, they're actual plot points in this. They are characters. And I was like, oh wow. What a neat turn of events.
Yeah, I mean, it's on some level, it's not like the original Odyssey, the existence of the gods didn't have an impact on the plot, but at least to my understanding, when it comes to Epic, they're a much bigger deal when it comes to the overall plot of the musical.
They are. Actually, they have their own musical numbers, where Athena actually argues with a lot of the other gods for trying to fuck up her plans with him, to the point where you're like, ma'am, that's not how this works.
Like, lovely musical number, but, yeah.
No, legitimately, she has a whole musical number where she's fighting with Aphrodite, and I was like, I feel like people always get this wrong with Aphrodite. Aphrodite is married legitimately to the god of war. There is a reason for that. They love each other insofar as they hate each other, which means it's a deep ocean of, like, connectivity. Because you can love somebody just as much as you absolutely despise them. She can be a real bitch.
Emotion be strong.
Right. In even all of her myth, she can be a very petty and vindictive person.
Well, I feel like that's most of the Greek gods.
Yeah, but most people are like, oh, it's love. She wouldn't be mean and spiteful. Yes, she is. That's why her son is literally Eros, which is literally just sexual love. Like, she has enough children to differentiate. There's a friendship love. There's a sexual attraction love. There's me, who's actual, like, romantic love. Then we have the weird, it's an inanimate object love, which was a weird kid because that's a kid she had with her other husband, Hephaestus, which was like, huh. A lot of follow-ups, but we don't got time for that.
Yeah, going through all of the Greek mythology would be several tea times all their own.
The point is, you can rewrite myths and legends because we've been doing that for 5 anyway. It's just, it's group storytelling on, like, a generational level.
Yeah, like realistically, there isn't a here is the one canon Greek mythology. Like, we don't for one, they were passed down spoken. They were not written down. So we don't have the originals because the originals weren't written down. But more importantly, the versions that do exist at different points in time, even if we had the earliest one that was written down, because of the aforementioned, they were originally passed down via oral tradition, that first one written down is not whatever the original was when it was passed down via oral tradition.
Right. For the record, right, Zeus is like the granddaddy king of all the gods. That was something that was passed down to us in modern society. There's no actual concrete proof that that's true. For all you know, Zeus could have just been the guy they put there because Hades was literally on the mend after being eaten for 1,000,000 years by his father, and then Hades took the throne and decided, nah man, it's too bright, I'm going downstairs. You don't know. We don't know. We in modern society very much have picked apart these stories and mishmashed them together like some Frankenstein of... I don't know. Like, it's palatable to us now.
At best, the way that we can the way that we can argue it is one of, this is the earliest version that we have available. And because of commonalities that carry through across time, we can, like, on some level have these things probably stretched back further in time, but we can't know definitively for sure. Another area of possible complication is one of translation, since the original Greek myths, spoiler alert, weren't in English.
Are you telling me that Greek myths written in Greek, spoken in Greek languages, and also iterated and spoken aloud by Greek ministers, peasants, and farmers alike weren't in English? Paco, that's heresy.
I know, but it is a hard truth that must be told. And one of the issues that happens when it comes to translating works from one language to another one is that things can get lost in translation.
This is very true. For the record, right, there is a word in Spanish that means one thing, but when translated into English, it is drastically different. If you hear somebody in Spanish say, tonterías. Tonterías, when translated to English, they means like fairy tales, legends, like, stories. Tonterías, the actual translation, is literally bullshit. But because it doesn't sound like a harsh enough word, it got translated to, like myths, like legends, stories. And it's like, lies, basically.
It's a translation that it underlies some of the general meaning, but it isn't exact. It's not exactly the same thing.
Right, because in Spanish, mentiroso means liar. But you're not calling the story a liar, or the individual telling you it a liar. You're calling the context of what they are telling you false. Tonterías.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, one of the things in Spanish that I first really had a strong connection of, like, translating can give very different impressions here, because word simply does not exist, is shade and shadow in English have the same word in Spanish, sombra.
Right, I was like, sombra literally can either mean shade, like under a tree, or your shadow, the thing that sits on the ground.
Yep. So within the Spanish language, there is no distinction between these two things. They are the same concept. And that is a relatively simple example of where you can run into translation problems across languages, where one language either has multiple words for a thing, or they have no word for the thing.
Right, it's the reason why I always giggle at people. It's like, how do you say handcuffs in Spanish? Esposa. How do you say spouse in Spanish? Esposo. Huh? Yeah, welcome to Spanish. Sometimes, depending on the context of how you use it in a sentence, depends entirely on what you are saying.
Yes. As is the case for basically all languages, realistically,
Right.
especially in the present day,
Right.
as we keep developing new words.
Right. I like to tell people this. It's like the syntax for the lexicon hasn't been invented yet. Literally meaning what you're trying to put into words hasn't been invented yet. Therefore, it's not in the language like Rolodex yet. It can't be because we haven't made that word.
Mm-hmm. The idea of having a concept or where there is a missing word is often referred to as, well, one of the terminologies for it is a lexical gap, and that is simply describing here is a concept that this language does not have a word for. I initially encountered this when talking about the fact that we don't actually have a word for someone that is not a virgin. At least in English. There is virgin, and then there is
everybody else.
Everyone else.
Which, that in itself, right, the word virgin, it is very much a weird word, because it's like, it has a lot of different meanings. Do you mean the sense that you have never been in a marital bed, like this is your first time doing it? Do you mean virgin as in this is the first time you're doing a specific task? Do you mean virgin as in this is the first time that you are getting your hair something done with it or treated? Do you mean the olive oil that you're going to sprinkle into the water before you throw in the pasta? Be specific.
Yeah. Yep. Now, one of my favorite things that came out of that particular conversation was the group consensus decision that we do need a word for people that are not virgins, and that word should be verge out.
Well, if you're in, you're in. If you're out, you're out.
Yep.
Yeah.
That is it just tickles me as an amusing pun.
It is because there's not a word for it, and you know what? Okay. How do I say this coming across as mean? You know what? I just realized it's my channel. I can come across as mean as I damn well please. It bothers me a lot, and I don't want to sound condescending to it, but it's like the fact that we just, as a society, have not decided to make words for certain things that absolutely need to be, like, words for, bothers me. Is because you would think, at some point, somebody would invent a word to describe the things that they're going with, and then just keep using it until their immediate friend group gets used to using it, and then that friend group's friend group, you know what I mean? Just like through osmosis, It is a word that is now used. Like FOMO. FOMO did not exist 40 years ago. FOMO is the fear of missing out. It was taken from a whole sentence, to an acronym, to a word that has no acronyms.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if the official dictionaries have acknowledged the last stage yet, but on some level, that doesn't matter. Like, if people are using it, then it's being used as a word.
Right.
This isn't France, where they actually have a department of the government that authorizes new French words.
Which is all just like, comment se dice, too many fucking vowels.
This is America, where we make our own words and go, yeah, this exists.
Right. And then it's just, okay. It bothers me on a level I cannot actually explain why, but I like to point this out to people. It's like, okay, prior to 50 years ago, right, or 60 years ago, my disease had an entirely different name. It was literally called Legionnaire's disease. And before that, it was called Crohn's spine. It's literally gone through like 4 different rebrandings until we finally settled on multiple sclerosis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's always one of the fun things about science-y things, is that name reworks happen with some level of frequency, it seems.
Oh, right, because like new information keeps coming out and you have to constantly keep redoing it and blah blah blah. Mm-hmm.
And honestly, on some level, I appreciate that that happens because it is an acknowledgement of our knowledge has shifted. We need to advance the language to acknowledge the reality that we've discovered or uncovered.
Though I know, right? It's almost like human beings are constantly growing, adapting, and evolving beings that must always do this.
Okay, now Hella, that's just crazy talk.
I know.
We all know that people are static and unchanging.
Oh my god. Okay, yeah.
Where's my sarcasm sign?
Sarcasm. But no, it does. It bothers me is because, like, group storytelling in and of itself has gone through, over the course of several generations, has gone through a lot of different, like, twists and turns, but twists and turns that make sense. Like, okay, group storytelling wasn't really a thing in the 40s and 50s because we had other stuff going on. Then the 60s happened. What happened in the 60s? We don't talk about the 60s because it was a lot of people not remembering anything because, yeah. That was a whole thing in and of itself.
There were a small amount of social upheavals going on in the 60s.
Right, so then the 70s happened.
And the 50s.
Right. So then the 70s happened. Well, what happened in the 70s? Technically speaking, the 60s and 70s saw a change in how media was portrayed. And I mean that as in, they started to include people of color. Like, prior to this, right, it was really hard to find people of color in any kind of media outside of very specific films and or one-off, like, episodes and TV shows.
Very, very specific roles within film.
Right.
During the 60s.
The 60s and 70s saw a turn.
Or previous to the 60s, sorry.
Right. So 60s and 70s saw a turn where they were now including them as major character beats. Now go to the 80s and 90s, they are now actual named cast members, right, that are in shows now. Fast forward to the 2000s.
Or even where they are, like, where
character.
Non-white characters are the main cast and the main characters.
Right. Then fast forward to the 2000s, early 2000s, you start seeing them more as actual player characters in the narrative. What do you mean player characters? Other than being a side character that maybe has one speaking role for like 2 episodes a season, they are now part of the main cast. They are now part of the main story. They are now a main character beat. Fast forward to the 2010s. That has now changed drastically. It's now odd to not see anybody that's not white and stuff because you're like, wait a minute, where do you live that it's nothing but white people? Serious question. What part of Wisconsin are you in?
One of the rural parts.
It must be true. Now you fast forward to more modern media. Now more modern media has said, yes, everybody gets to have a piece of the pie because the world has gotten very big while we've been away.
Well, and this all is a tied-in element of the way storytelling has shifted over time, in that even though throughout this entire era, the types of stories that Hella is describing are largely ones that are being done from, like, on a corporation level, the focus of how those stories are being told has shifted over time. And that is a reflection of society more broadly. And that is an element that happened with the group storytelling when we were talking about myths before, in how the framing and the overall narrative of myths would shift as times changed, as locations changed. But it also can reflect the changing of group storytelling that's taking place in the present day. And by present day, I'm referring to this era that Hella was talking about, the last, 70 years.
Which was very broad strokes, by the way. Like, I'm sure I missed something. This was
generalization. This is a bare bones generalization to provide a rough framework. There's a lot more nuanced details in there that we are currently ignoring.
God, I'm gonna have to make a video on that.
All right, I'll write it down.
No, I mean, I'm gonna have to make a video on that and be like, damn it, I shot myself in the foot.
But one of the things that I was going to bring up is that because Star Trek, the original series, the one that came out in the 60s, one of the things that is credited with helping spawn is
Lieutenant Uhura.
Oh, shoot. What's the terminology? Yes, Lieutenant Uhura, but also fandom. That's the word I was looking for.
Oh, yes.
Because people started writing their own stories about the characters in the show. And this wasn't something that was commonly done previously.
Yeah.
But now, here we are, 60 years later.
AO3 is a thing. They've got so much fanfiction.
Yeah, yeah, AO3 is a thing. It is now the norm. And up until really the early 2000s, there were a lot of entities and authors that actively bashed and attempted to use the force of law to keep people from writing their own stories about their own, about the characters that they made.
Oh, yeah. Anne Rice, actually, until her death, actually had a really strong hold on, no, you cannot write fanfiction about my stuff. And she finally, a month or two before her death, let that go. And people that had been sitting on their stuff were so excited, they spammed AO3 so hard with all of their shit. AO3 got taken down because they're like, you gotta give us a minute. We have a bunch of new stuff coming in.
Hold on. We have a lot of new stories incoming.
Right.
But that element of group storytelling is along the lines of what we had talked about when it came to myths or fairy tales. These are the same characters. Sometimes they are retellings of the original story, but very often they are continuations or alternate versions of the story with different characters.
Right. Okay. If you've been on the channel for a long time, you saw my tea time with my friend Requiem, where we actually talk about the fact that the very, very, very original story of Red Riding Hood, why was Grandma out in the middle of the woods all by her lonesome? It seems like an odd story choice. It's not. If you go back all the way to the first original one, Grandma was a witch out in the middle of the woods. That's why she was there. Because the town was changing from paganism to more mainstream religion, and she knew, right? She saw the writing on the wall long before it happened. It might not be a good idea for me to be in the town proper, because I'm gonna rub people the wrong way. So she went off to the woods, which is why Red Riding Hood had to walk 80 million miles to go get to her every other weekend.
Mm-hmm.
That's an exaggeration. She didn't walk 80 million miles. She walked 5.
It was a couple.
Fine. But yeah, right? It's that's the original story, but if you read the modern retellings of it, Grandma just lived out in the woods because she was a feeble old lady and the wolf... No, none of that. Characters...
there's missing context.
Right, all the characters in the story have not changed, right? Their roles in the story have drastically changed.
Mm-hmm. That actually ties into another thing that I wanted to bring up in terms of how... with storytelling over time, that original context can get lost as circumstances change. People may no longer value the thing that gets dropped, and therefore it is lost from the story and can completely change its meaning. The example that I want to give, though, has to do with common sayings. Because there are a lot of sayings that we use that are actually shortened versions of the original, and because we don't have, at the very least, we don't commonly use the whole saying, by only using the shortened element, we change its meaning. One such example is, curiosity killed the cat.
Mm-hmm.
A shortened saying that indicates now don't be curious because that will kill you. But the original saying is curiosity killed the cat, but satisfaction brought it back. Which is, in fact, a saying that says curiosity is dangerous sometimes, but it's okay.
Right.
It is an acceptable thing to do.
Or
another example is great minds think alike.
oh.
Kind of yes, we all have the same idea. That must mean that we are correct. But the extended phrase is great minds think alike, though fools seldom differ, which is a warning against groupthink.
Yeah. Basically, right, I'll admit it, I'm a fool. I've got them bozo genetics in my DNA. Fools have a hard time disagreeing with each other is because if it works, but the second that something doesn't seem right, they'll argue until the cows come home about it. Mm-hmm. Even if they're wrong, they're still gonna argue about it.
Well, and one of the things with both of these phrases that have been cut down, their cut down versions were a thing that developed during the 20th century. Their original versions pre-existed basically the modern era that we're in. Mm-hmm. And the way that they have been cut down does fit with a society that has we want to be cohesive. We want to be safe. We want to be conservative.
Yeah, well, that's
which benefits a certain kind of status quo.
Yeah, well, that's like the saying, right? Blood is thicker than water. That is a sentence that has been wildly taken out of context. The actual phrasing is, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb, indicating sometimes your bonds are stronger for people that you choose to be in the family rather than the ones that are genetically related to you. It doesn't mean that you can't have a strong bond with your family. It just means sometimes you feel a stronger connection to people outside of it, your covenant.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then people took that to mean witchy stuff, and I'm like, huh?
It's like, no, that's not what covenant means.
Right? It's like covenant and coven are two entirely separate words. Similar spelling, two totally separate words.
Very, very different in meaning.
Right. Coven does actually mean witches, right? That's literally, for the pagans that might be listening, that is their word, right? That literally means, their group of magic users. Asterisk. I'm not entirely too sure, don't quote me on that, but whatever. And then covenant literally means a group of your peers to which you often seek counsel.
Yeah, covenant is an agreement. Coven is a group.
Yeah, my guys, two totally...
Yep.
Right? When I first heard that as a kid,
very different things.
Yeah, I heard that as a kid, words. I had a whole minute where I was like, I don't think I'm smart enough to do these mental gymnastics to get where you got. And now I realize as an adult, there were no gymnastics. I could have just walked to the other end of the arena.
Yeah. all you have to do is not actually know what words mean.
I think you don't know what that word means.
You keep using that word.
I don't think you know what it
means. I do not think it means what you think it means.
Yeah, but it is, right? It's like, look, the more that the lexicon changes, the more stories will also have to change in order to keep the story in the social zeitgeist in any way, shape, or form.
And the way that the world changes, stories also change to adjust to that. And there are going to be people that are upset at those changes. Because, well, that's not the story that I remember. But sometimes it's okay for the story to change. Yeah.
I love the fact that everybody always makes Apollo out to be this, playboy, masochism is not the word I'm looking for. Masochist? It's not the word. Misogynist? There we go. Deep-seated misogyny.
we found it.
Right? Where it's like, oh, he just constantly was after women and everything, and all I could think of is there's a whole story where he fell in love with a boy so beautiful that he literally begged his mother Hera to give him the fruit to make him immortal so he would never lose him. His mom told him nah, and he stole the fruit anyway, and he still has that little boy with him. Not actually like a child, but like in terms of age, like comparatively.
Mm-hmm.
This kid was like 25, this man's pushing like 40 million, like it's a big age gap.
Yeah. He is pushing an age that is indeterminate because God.
Right. But some people are like, no, he's the sun god. I was like, Zeus also had a male lover at one point in one of his stories. Also turned immortal. He's now the fucking, wine bearer, so that's gotta be a big middle finger to the wife he married.
Well, to be fair, Zeus was flinging those around a lot.
Yeah, see, I know this is hilarious, but like somebody asked me one time, it's like, wasn't divorce a thing in ancient Greece? I was like, yes, but no. And they were like, why yes, but no? I was like, a woman was allowed to divorce her husband, asterisk, so long as she could prove, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that he was not upkeeping to their marriage vows. For the record, that did not constitute cheating. She had to add something else other than that. A wedlock child out of wedlock, also not constitution of those grounds. So yeah, she could, but it was hard to do.
It's the technically yes, but asterisk.
Right. Like, if she could prove that her husband was a traitor to the country, immediate, no questions asked, she's out of there. But if she's just like, he's sleeping around with other women, he's got 4 other kids from some other woman, and? What do you mean, and? And what do you want us to do about it? He is legally within his rights.
Mm-hmm.
But also, it turned out it was fair play in that community, so if she had a kid with some other guy, he also couldn't divorce her.
And it should also be noted that we are making a broad generalization across ancient Greece, because like ancient Greece wasn't really like a country; it was a like large culture group. It would be a bit like saying, yes, this is how divorce works in Europe, like in modern Europe, when there are 26 different countries with their own laws and cultures and etc. etc.
Right.
And I know that 26 is an underestimation.
Right. But Hella, didn't you say that the Vikings also had divorce? Yes, here's the main difference though. Vikings wrote all of their stuff down. So this is not anybody guessing. They literally had whole books of law that were ready. And they said, no, she can divorce you for any reason, my guy, but if she does divorce you, half of your stuff automatically is hers. And she gets to keep the house in the event of this divorce. Like... The Vikings as a broad generalization culturally, because again, like when we're talking about ancient peoples, they didn't really have states in the way that we vision them now, but like the Vikings in particular, as a broad generalization, were a bit more egalitarian than a lot of other civilizations in the 1000 AD. Yeah, women were allowed to not only get a house from their divorced husband, that man, until the day he remarried, had to actually pay her a stipend out of anything that he did as far as, like, the looting. So he'd go looting, a small percentage of that had to go to his divorced wife, and then it had to go back to the collective to be redistributed amongst everybody else. Which I was like, that's the funniest
also
shit I've ever heard.
Yeah.
But why is that a thing, Hella? Well, because, like, compared to everybody else, the Vikings were on some libertarian bullshit long before anybody, but the modern media has portrayed them as horrible savages. Not really. Actually, they were a lot cleaner than most of Europe.
Well, it's one of those things of history is usually written by the winners, but when it's written by the losers, they're very bitter about the winners. And a lot of what we know about the Vikings weren't written down by the Vikings. They were written down by the victims of Viking raids. Right.
Like, if you actually talk to people from Norway, Scandinavia, and, like, Sweden, respectively, hi, Tuma, he's a friend, the Viking culture, even though it's not as aggressive as it used to be, it's still a thing that is very much part of that society. Like, it's influenced a lot of their stuff.
Nordic culture, yeah, Nordic culture broadly is still very much has very much influence within Scandinavia. But we're gonna go marching off to war has not been much of a thing in Nordic history for the last 200 years.
They traded their axes for free healthcare. I feel like they got the better deal.
Yeah, that much is true.
Well, also it's a thing, right? When people are like, well, you can't name a lot of great female rulers and everything. I was like, actually, there are a lot of female rulers that were completely erased from history, and it's only been recently in like the last 20 years that they've come back in to fashion, is because people really want to know about it. Outside of like Cleopatra and like the Queen of England, there was more.
Oh yeah, there were a significant number of more female leaders in history. They just tend to get underemphasized. Or, as you say, completely erased from the historical... Well, not completely, but they tried to erase them completely from the historical record. And you know what? I'm going to go back on that and say that there probably have been female leaders that have been erased from the historical record, because we know about so many attempts to erase them that some of them must have worked.
Okay, you want to know what?
Just by the laws of statistics.
I love this. So, my friend, back when we were in middle school, right, we were learning about Alexander the Great, and she made this joke, and to this day it's still the funniest shit she's ever said. She goes, Alexander the Great kept getting all these women and stuff to be married to him. What if nobody ever knew that Alexander the Great was like, it was a mispronunciation of the name? What if she was just like, ma'am, you're beautiful, but I don't like you like that? And I was like, can you imagine though if the greatest man in history that conquered so much shit was actually just some girl completely done with everybody? And it's like, oh no, that's okay, I don't really want your wife. Please take her. Please don't.
It is a fun alternate history, but...
Yeah, no, but it's still the funniest shit she said ever. I was like, I hate to break this to you, but like, they have adequate proof that no, he was really, for reals, he's a guy. Because all the places he conquered also called him a dude. Like, at some point, somebody would have been like, you're very pretty for a guy.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing where if we start second guessing historical records on that, like it ends up being the thing of like, well, then we can't know anything.
Yeah. Still, hi Jessica. Still the funniest shit Jessica ever said, but also no.
Oh yeah, definitely very funny as a joke.
Right, I looked at her and she was like, what if it's just some girl who doesn't want to marry them? I was like, I hate to break this to you, but denial is more than a river in Egypt. He was fucking gay. And she was like, huh? I was like, come on.
Yeah. Yeah. We have historical evidence on that one too.
Right, I got yelled at by that middle school teacher that he goes, Alexander the Great wasn't gay, he was just a man of honor. And I was like, yeah, gay men have a lot of honor for women too. I'm sorry, man, you're beautiful, but nah.
I mean, it's like, probably he was what we would consider bisexual.
At best.
Yeah. But, like, as I've talked about in other places before, we can run into issues trying to superimpose our modern conceptions of, like, sexuality on other societal systems that don't have those same conceptions of sexuality.
Well, yeah, like, this is actually not group storytelling. Prior to the internet,
I was gonna say, we have veered well off the path on this one. We are deep in the woods.
I'm about to take it all the way back. Before the introduction of modern Christianity and, like, the subsequent conquering of many other places, a lot of other countries would hold gender into a weird three-state thing, right? Man, woman, and then other. And it wasn't a secret third thing, right? This other could be anything. It could be somebody who was, in our modern vernacular, trans. It could be a modern vernacular of non-binary. It could also be a modern vernacular of intersex. It was just meant not one of these two. That's what the other was. But there was a lot of...
I'm going to jump in briefly to also state that a a lot of cultures also operated off of genders that did not map onto like man, woman, a third gender. They mapped onto they could have mapped onto different conceptions of gender as well.
Right.
It's complicated.
Right. I'm just going with the three because it
continue.
helps us see. It's like it helps keep
Yep.
you in the thing, right? The secret third
Yep.
thing, then the standard two. The reason why I bring this up is because there was a lot of myth that went with the secret third gender. Not only was it a point of, well, maybe they are just two, right? Maybe it's twins, right? Two of them trapped in the same body, so that's why they feel that way. I'm sure if they ever bothered to ask one of these people, they would have gotten a real quick, no, that's dumb, but whatever. My point still stands. It became a group story of why, right? It's an explanation of how and why we got here. Even if it was completely false, that was the narrative that happened. And then everything changed when the conquerors showed up. And then all of a sudden, there's only two options?
Yeah, it is one of the unfortunate elements of Christianity, at least as it became established over time, that it went, nope, these are the only two. These are the only two things. See, it says so in the Bible.
Right, like, I like to bring this up to people and they'd never like to listen to me, and I'm sure Rain would have more information because I heard about this fourth hand, so I will probably get a lot of things wrong. But in general, the broad vernacular is Native Americans sometimes would have what they would call star children. Air quote that. Star children were what happened when the kid was either a little bit too smart or a little bit too different, that they joked, it's like, oh, your husband didn't get you pregnant, a star got you pregnant. Literally trying to explain away other, right? It's a star child.
Yeah, I have absolutely no information on this.
Yeah, no. But basically it's like, the myth was star children, right? Meaning they came from the sky, right? Something else gave them life. No, it's like, it's basically trying to explain away what might have been our modern vernacular of autism, or like, you know, something mentally that happened that there was no word for. So the word was star children. Your kid's sick. That's the nice way of saying it.
Well, I wouldn't even put it that way. It's your kid is not what you were expecting.
Right.
Like
changelings. Changelings were also another funny way of saying, I don't think that kid's even fucking theirs.
that one I am more familiar with, and I do suspect that when it comes to the changeling mythology, that probably was referencing autism. But that being said, it's also one way of a particular kind of social structure trying to explain a difference from what was perceived to be the norm. Because I will go out of my way to say that there is nothing wrong or abnormal about being autistic. It is part of the normal human experience. It is part of the normal human range, so to speak. And frankly, its relative prevalence within modern humans, I would suggest, implies that historically it had significant benefits to human societies, to human communities. And I would argue that that remains the case today. It's just that we don't, in the modern day especially, we don't structure our societies in ways to accommodate people that are outside of anything but a very narrow band of what is perceived as normal.
Right. Now, this is not to say, right, that once upon a time, long, long ago, before any of these words even existed, we didn't just look at somebody who was other and be like, ooh, maybe we shouldn't let them see tomorrow. We might have looked at it like, $20 says whoever we fight next probably doesn't have this, so we might be able to literally win them by scaring the shit out of them. $20.
Well, it's also when it comes to things like having different skill sets within the community. As one of the relatively common traits with people on the autistic spectrum are hyper focus on particular things. You know what? Having someone in your community that knows like every single mushroom in existence, that seems useful.
Right, literally.
We know which ones are good to eat and which ones are not because we have our friend here that remembers everything.
Right? Check it out. Grog, what is this? That's a red cap mushroom. You can use them for eating medicinal purposes, and they also come in 3 different shades of red. And this one looks the exact same. That is not a red cap mushroom. If you eat that, you'll die. It's spooky how he knows the difference by sight alone. It works. Like, we never have to guess what we're picking.
Yep. And that's not to say that, that someone who is not autistic can't, remember a whole bunch of stuff. But I personally hypothesize that that was something that for a community of humans was useful to exist as a society.
Yeah, also
one of the
would have been fun too, because it's like, do they sleep? Rarely.
Well, or just the fact that people have different sleep schedules. Like, my natural sleep schedule has me set to be awake until the early hours of the AM.
Yeah?
That, when it comes to modern society, that is not very conducive with how we have structured modern society. But for a group of hunter-gatherers, that probably was useful to have some people that were willing to stay up into, the 3 a.m., 4 a.m. Then you had someone who was awake while everyone else was asleep.
Well, also, it would make sense, right? If, one guard has been on rotation for, 12 hours, it's, 3:30, and then there comes their friend who just woke up about 40 minutes ago, eating their breakfast, a quick high five, and then it's their turn for the 12-hour shift because they're awake. There is no lapse in, guard duty.
And it's taking advantage of people's natural cycles rather than forcing people into it.
Right. People who are bakers. I don't know how the hell you guys get up at 4 in the morning to go break bread, but God bless you. Counterpoint, I don't get out of bed until 9:30, 10 o'clock because my body is tuned to that. That's my awake time.
Yeah.
Late morning, early afternooner.
Yeah. But as I had mentioned before, we have gone deep into the woods.
Into the thick of it.
Yeah, we have Dungeon Master, get us out of here.
I can't think of anything too much else to say. If you want to participate in group writing, I would suggest finding a role-playing partner, and then you guys just need to settle on whatever your world is, and then just go.
Yeah, there actually is one other thing that I had wanted to mention on that front, because if my memory serves, aren't you currently writing a story with another person right now? Or have been recently?
I have been RPing with our good friend Poppy. That's been fun. But I have recently decided to write a witchy book, not Harry Potter, right? We're better than Harry Potter. But I actually wanted to use actual IRL paganism as the backdrop for it. So I actually had to ask my pagan friends to be on this document with me, not because they're writing it, but so that way in the event I have a question, I can leave it in the document and they can answer me before I proceed to fuck up my story.
Very good. Yeah.
Which I'll say it now, if there's any pagans that are listening to this, I understand that every witch has their different thing, but I'm talking broad strokes. We're painting a wall with one stroke broad, generalization.
Yeah.
But don't you just become a witch? No, I'm good. I am not into conforming to any religion or denomination. I'm very, very comfy where I'm at.
Very fair. But that was so that I wanted to at the very last throw that in there on when it comes to group storytelling. One of the other things that you can do is find a friend and continue a story with that person back and forth. Whether that is roleplay or a narrative of both of your own design, or as I believe I have mentioned on this channel before, though my memory is fuzzy on it, that my wife and I have been working on a cooperative story. Not in the sense of writing one book, but in the sense of she is writing one story, I am writing a separate story within the same world-building universe, and our characters do interact, so there is overlap in our stories, but our narratives are distinct to each other.
Paco's a history nerd. He actually is just like, I'm about to explain to you how we got here. Thank you.
Oh, I am going for the political thriller, and she is going for it's adventure time.
It's adventure time. Yeah. But yeah, that's it. Like, in the end, if you really want to participate in group storytelling, come to Tumblr, the land where the national sport is lying, or find a friend and start writing.
Yep.
Don't even worry about, like, correct grammar or, like, syntax or anything.
Oh yeah, that stuff is for if you want to get published. The other possibility, like, join a D&D group.
That too. But yeah, that's really it. Like, I know we went hard left, but we got back to it.
Yeah, we ourselves completely tangented into the woods, just like a D&D group that did not follow the path towards the major story beat.
Can I roll for initiative? You can roll to end this conversation. 1.
Yeah, just like the dungeon master that's running out of time. We took a very hard right back to the end state, and we faced the final boss. Yay, we won.
Yep. So thank you guys so much for showing up. This is again the illustrious co-host Paco.
Greetings
and
goodbye.
Goodbye.